The ocean tonight is more silent than a dream. No rushing currents, no crashing waves, only the slow breath of the tide, expanding and fading like the chest of something vast and eternal. Down in the stillness, Bikini Bottom sleeps. The coral houses shimmer with faint reflections from the moon above, their colors softened to pale lavender and cool blue. The sea anemones close their petals, resting like sleepy flowers. Even the smallest bubbles move slowly, floating upward as if they too are falling asleep before they reach the surface. Somewhere far above, the surface of the sea glimmers faintly. It looks almost solid from here, a trembling mirror that captures the last glows of distant stars. When the water is this calm, the whole ocean feels like one unbroken thought, smooth, patient, endless. Near the edge of jellyfish fields, tiny sparks drift between coral ridges. They are plankton, glowing softly in rhythm with the heartbeat of the ocean. Each one a fragment of light, a dot in an underwater sky. Together they weave a galaxy beneath the waves, a reflection of the heavens above. The reef below is quiet, but not empty. Small crabs move slowly through the sand, leaving delicate trails behind them. Seagrass bends with the soft push of the current. From somewhere deep in the rocks, a low hum rises, the ancient sound of the sea breathing. The world above is full of stars tonight. Through the surface, their reflections scatter like silver dust across the water. Every wave, every curve of the sea catches a piece of starlight and carries it downward, letting it dance on coral, shells, and sleeping sea life. Not far from the reef stands SpongeBob's pineapple house. Its windows glow faintly gold, a soft, warm hue against the blue of the ocean night. Inside, everything is still. A lamp glows beside the bed, lighting SpongeBob's face as he sleeps with a small smile. His breathing is gentle, steady, like the sound of the tide brushing sand. Outside, his garden sways with the rhythm of the water. Tiny bubbles drift upward from the soil, catching the glow of the house and the faint silver of the moon. A snail shell lies near the porch. Gary is tucked in quietly for the night. The snail's gentle breathing sends ripples through the sand, soft enough to make nearby pebbles shift slightly, like they're sighing in their sleep. The light from SpongeBob's window spreads just far enough to touch a coral archway nearby. There, a school of tiny fish rests, their scales catching hints of yellow and pink. When the current moves, they shimmer like a living rainbow, then grow still again. It's a beautiful kind of stillness, one that doesn't need silence, only peace. The reef around Bikini Bottom stretches wide and winding. Each corner of it has its own sound, its own rhythm. In one hollow, the current hums softly through a crack in the rock, sounding like a slow flute. In another, shells tumble together with every wave, whispering a language that only the ocean understands. And in the distance, where the water deepens into soft darkness, the faint outlines of larger coral rise like mountains. Their peaks are covered in glowing algae, dim green against the deep blue. This is the ocean's night sky stars below instead of above, drifting light instead of burning fire. Everything moves in time. Each flicker, each ripple, each drifting speck of light, all part of a rhythm so slow, it feels like the sea itself is asleep. Even the shadows drift without direction, gliding over the sand like memories too soft to remember clearly. A single jellyfish floats through the calm, glowing faintly pink. Its body moves with the grace of a heartbeat, pulsing upward, drifting down again. As it passes over the reef, its soft light brushes the coral, the shells, the sand, and for a moment, it looks like the whole ocean is breathing with it. Then it drifts onward, glowing fainter with distance until it vanishes into the dark. In this deep quiet, even time seems slower. Minutes stretch like waves, long, gentle, endless. The ocean isn't rushing anywhere. It's simply being. Every sound is part of the same melody, the soft sigh of the currents, the quiet hum of sleeping creatures, the occasional shimmer of a bubble breaking free. Up above, the moonlight bends through the water, forming slow-moving beams that cut across the seafloor. They move like ghosts, pale and weightless. Where they touch, the sand glows faintly silver. Every so often, a curious fish swims through one, its body flashing white for a brief moment before fading again into blue. In the shadow of a coral arch, a starfish rests on the sand. Its arms are spread gently, its body covered in faint dust from the seafloor. For a long while, it doesn't move. Only the water moves around it. Tiny grains of sand lift, drift, and settle again, over and over, as if the ocean itself is tucking the starfish into bed. Nearby, a hermit crab adjusts its shell, then pauses halfway through a step. Even the crab seems reluctant to disturb the peace. It waits, still, until the faint vibration of a passing current fades. Then it slowly lowers itself back into the sand and stops moving again. Everything is holding its breath. Not from fear, not from waiting, but from calm. The kind of calm that comes when the sea forgets to move fast, when the stars above forget to flicker. It's the calm that only happens when the ocean and the sky fall asleep together. If you could listen closely enough, you'd hear the faintest echo of the surface, the soft touch of wind, far away, brushing over waves. But down here, it's only a whisper, too far to matter. Only the steady, quiet rhythm of water remains. The reef listens. The coral listens. Even the sand seems to listen. The whole ocean is one long breath, rising and falling, carrying the weight of endless stars above it. And in that breath, Bikini Bottom dreams. Its lights flicker softly under the water, its home swaying with the current. No voices, no sounds of work or play, only the hush of the sea, wrapping everything in slow blue peace. Farther along the reef, the light grows dimmer. The ocean takes on deeper shades of blue, the kind that almost feel like velvet, soft and endless. The colors blend together until the edges of the rocks and coral disappear, and everything becomes one smooth, moving horizon. Here the water is cooler. It carries the memory of the open sea, slow and gentle, brushing against the reef like a sigh. Each movement feels intentional, as if the ocean itself has slowed down to rest. A trail of bubbles rises from a cluster of rocks. They drift lazily upward, catching bits of moonlight as they go. For a moment, they almost look like stars escaping the sea, bright, fragile, brief. Then they fade into the darker layers above, leaving nothing but silence behind. The coral here hums faintly. Not a sound that can be heard, only felt, a soft vibration that echoes through the sand and water. Tiny shrimp shift between coral branches, their bodies almost invisible in the faint blue glow. Their movement stirs small clouds of dust, shimmering like mist. Each grain of sand glows for an instant before settling again. In the distance, a slow shadow moves the silhouette of a manta ray gliding over the seafloor. Its wings spread wide, rippling with each graceful motion. As it passes, it disturbs the sand below in perfect spirals, which drift upward and dissolve like smoke. Then the ray disappears again to the deeper dark, where no light can follow. The reef sighs, and the sea continues its quiet rhythm. Every living thing moves together, corals swaying, seaweed bending, small fish gliding between branches. Even the smallest creature seems part of a slow, invisible dance. Closer to the center of Bikini Bottom, the outlines of the homes appear again, the pineapple, the stone head, the anchor. They rest like ancient monuments under the still moonlight. Not a door creaks, not a bubble stirs from any window. Everything is perfectly still. Squidward's house stands tall and shadowed, the shape of his Easter Island head carved by the sea's glow. Inside, he sleeps with his clarinet resting near his bed. Sometimes, when the current moves through his window, it passes over the clarinet's open holes, creating a faint hum, soft, almost musical. It sounds like the ocean playing a lullaby just for him. Outside, his front yard is scattered with shells that shimmer when the light hits them. Some of them belong to small creatures that moved on long ago. Now they lie here, washed clean by the sea, polished smooth by time. Every one of them reflects the faintest bit of moonlight, like tiny mirrors placed gently on the sand. Patrick's rock is quiet, too. No sound comes from underneath except the occasional sleepy sigh. His rock lifts slightly each time he breathes out, then settles again. A small current swirls around its edges, carrying slow trails of plankton past. Even the water seems to bend around his resting shape, careful not to disturb his dream. All across Bikini Bottom, the night deepens. The water becomes heavier, more still, like the ocean itself has fallen into a deep slumber. Soft shadows from coral and homes stretch across the sand, overlapping and blending, until the whole town looks painted in blue and silver. A pair of jellyfish drift overhead, their long tendrils trailing light behind them. Each pulse of their bodies sends out a wave that ripples across the sand below. It touches everything, shells, coral, the rooftops of homes, and disappears without sound. Their path glows faintly for a few seconds before fading into darkness again. Even the kelp forest beyond the town is quiet tonight. Long strands sway together in slow motion, brushing against each other in gentle rhythm. Every now and then a faint shimmer runs through the leaves, catching starlight from above. Tiny fish dart between them, their bodies flashing for an instant like sparks in the dark. A sea cucumber rests at the forest's edge, its body curled among small stones. It doesn't move much, just expands and contracts with the tide. The sand around it is marked with faint trails, little patterns carved by its slow wandering during the day. Now they remain as quiet lines in the dust, like delicate writing left behind for no one to read. The silence grows deeper. Even the sound of the current fades until only the faint pop of distant bubbles remains. Each one rises, bursts softly, and disappears into the upper darkness. It's a sound so gentle it could almost be mistaken for a breath. The reef feels endless in this quiet, every ridge, every shadow blending into one slow heartbeat. The water carries faint echoes of things that once moved faster. Laughter, footsteps, the chatter of the day. But down here, those sounds dissolve before they can take shape. They become part of the hum, part of the stillness, part of the sea's slow dream. In the quietest part of the reef, a single pearl sits half buried in the sand. The light finds it. Even here, the silver of the moon bending through the water until it touches the small round shell. It gleams faintly, its surface glowing with a light too too soft to be noticed from afar. It's as if the sea itself has hidden a tiny star beneath its floor, keeping it safe from everything above. Near that pearl, a sleeping sea snail stirs. Its antennae wave once, sensing the light, then settle again. The shell shifts slightly, releasing a puff of sand into the water. The grains swirl for a moment, catching what little light remains, then settle back into silence. The ocean moves on. It doesn't hurry, it never does. It rolls softly through coral branches, around sleeping homes, through fields of drifting seagrass. It hums low and steady, carrying warmth from the surface down into the dark. And with every motion, it whispers the same song, a song that never ends, a song made only of patience. Somewhere near the outer reef, a faint vibration runs through the water, the echo of a wail far away. It's not loud, but deep enough to be felt. The sound passes through the reef like thunder slowed to a sigh, shaking tiny particles of sand into motion. Then it fades, leaving the ocean even quieter than before. The world returns to stillness. The stars above flicker faintly, and their reflections shimmer across the surface once more. Everything below them remains unmoving, the coral, the homes, the sea itself caught in a moment that could last forever. Beyond Bikini Bottom's glowing windows and soft coral gardens, the sea grows darker. The water thickens, heavy with quiet, and every movement slows. It's not frightening, only vast, like stepping into a dream that doesn't end. Here, light moves differently. It doesn't shine, it drifts. The beams of moonlight that pass through the surface travel far, then dissolve softly into haze. The ocean swallows the light, keeps it, and turns it into something new, a faint, living glow that belongs only to the deep. The reef's edge is near. Past the last rocks of Bikini Bottom, the seafloor slopes downward in a slow descent. Each ridge fades into darker blue until shapes become silhouettes. The coral here grows in strange forms, long spirals, branching fingers, towers made of shadow and shimmer. They rise like sculptures, carved not by hands but by time and current. Tiny creatures drift between them, glowing plankton, small jellyfish, translucent fish with faint lights in their bellies. They move together like a constellation that has fallen to the sea. Each flicker of light becomes a pulse, a breath, a heartbeat. And slowly, the deep begins to glow from within. There is no sound except for the slow hum of the current. It moves past the coral towers and between the stones, singing a note too low to hear a vibration that can be felt in every drop of water. It's the sound of distance, the sound of the sea existing without end. From above, the stars seem to answer. Their reflections tremble on the surface, blurred and beautiful. Sometimes a fish passes below them, and the two worlds, sky and ocean, blend for a moment, as though the stars themselves have slipped underwater to rest. A soft cloud of sand rises near a cluster of shells. Something small moves there, a seahorse, slow. The night grows deeper now, and with it the ocean changes color. The surface above fades from silver blue to a darker indigo, and each ripple carries a reflection of the stars. They twinkle faintly through the moving water, soft, blurred, as if the sea itself is breathing in starlight. From the quiet streets of Bikini Bottom, the sky seems almost alive. Oh, between the coral rooftops and the kelp gardens, trails of light drift and dance, shaped by the gentle current. The sea has its own constellations, not written in maps or books, but drawn fresh every night by the shifting flow of the deep. A school of small fish moves slowly across the sand, their scales catching the dim light and scattering it like dust. From a distance, they look like a constellation themselves, tiny points moving in graceful rhythm, creating patterns only they understand. Each turn of their movement is silent, each glimmer soft and fleeting, a language written in light and water. High above, where the surface mirrors the moon, faint star reflections flicker through the ocean ceiling. They stretch and waver as though painted on moving glass. If you were to look long enough, you could see shapes forming the curve of a jellyfish, the outline of a sea star, a distant spiral like a seashell of light. The sea holds these constellations gently, never letting them stay in one form for too long. They drift, dissolve, and reform just like dreams. And for those who sleep beneath them, their stories change with every breath of the tide. Out near jellyfish fields, the water glows faintly with the pulse of the jellyfish. Their bodies rise and fall in slow motion, each one leaving a soft ring of light that lingers in the water for a moment before fading. Together, their glow weaves patterns that reach far into the distance, long, flowing lines that resemble starlight streaming across the sea. The jellyfish are the painters of the deep night, tracing slow constellations that only last for a few heartbeats. Some form arcs like crescent moons. Others gather in clusters, a gentle mimicry of the Milky Way above. Their light touches everything: coral spires, sleeping shells, even the drifting sand. And for a while, it feels as though the entire ocean is covered in stars. SpongeBob stirs softly in his sleep, his face lit by a faint blue shimmer leaking through his window. In his dreams, he's floating above the reef, surrounded by those same lights. They swirl around him, weightless and kind, whispering shapes and stories without sound. He reaches out, and his hand passes through a trail of glowing plankton, tiny living stars that scatter like dust, only to gather again. There is something ancient about the way light moves underwater. It bends and slows as if time itself is softer here. Every beam that passes through the waves becomes fluid, curling around coral pillars and drifting creatures. When a ray of moonlight hits a school of fish, it becomes a shifting constellation, reborn again with each flick of a fin. Patrick, asleep under his rock, dreams of floating among the stars. But his stars aren't in the sky. They're made of jellyfish bells and shining sea foam, gently pulsing in the dark. He drifts, half awake, half dreaming, surrounded by these flickering dots that rise and fall with his breath. For Patrick, the constellations are simple and kind, like smiling faces in the water. They blink once, twice, then fade, leaving only the calm glow of the ocean floor. Beyond the town, the coral plains stretch for miles, covered in soft blue light. Between the coral spires, strands of glowing kelp move gently, creating twisting shapes that echo the sky's constellations. Each bend of kelp, each flicker of bioluminescence, feels like the sea's quiet answer to the stars above. A mirror made not of glass, but of motion and life. If you were to swim far enough into the deep, you would find that the stars above and the lights below begin to merge. The surface of the ocean no longer separates them. Instead, it blurs them together. You could look up and down and see the same shimmer, the same patterns repeating in opposite directions, as if the sea and the sky are whispering to each other through a thin veil. A current drifts through Bikini Bottom now, slow and cool. It moves through the coral gardens, through the jellyfish fields, past the edges of SpongeBob's pineapple. The lights follow it, drifting dots that rearrange themselves, turning slowly into new shapes. One looks like a seahorse curled around a pearl. Another resembles a tiny boat made of bubbles, sailing across the underwater stars. The constellations of the sea are never fixed. They change as the fish move, as the sand settles, as the moonlight bends through waves. But even in their shifting, there is a strange kind of peace, a reminder that nothing needs to stay still to be beautiful. The stars themselves move across the heavens, and so do their reflections below. Sometimes, in the stillest part of the night, when every creature is asleep, and even the currents are slow, the constellations seem to pause. For a heartbeat, everything aligns: the stars above, the lights below, the soft silhouettes of coral and shell. In that moment, the sea feels infinite, and everything inside it feels connected. The lights seem to breathe together, one great slow exhale of the ocean itself. A distant whale's call travels through the deep, long and low. Its sound trembles through the water like a string plucked in space, and the constellations quiver in reply. The jellyfish pulse once more, the plankton shimmer, and the entire sea hums quietly. It's as though the ocean has found its own way of singing back to the stars. Above Bikini Bottom, the surface ripples once, catching a final glint of moonlight. The reflections scatter across the water, merging into the constellations below sky and sea, finally blending into one long, endless dream. Far out beyond the edge of jellyfish fields, the seafloor descends into wide, rolling plains of sand. Here the light fades slowly, until only a dim glow remains, the faint shimmer of plankton suspended in the dark. They drift like dust in a golden beam, though there is no sun here, only the memory of it. As the currents pass, the plankton swirl together in soft spirals, and for a moment, they take shape. A gentle arc, a curve, a scattered cluster, until suddenly, an entire constellation appears. A figure of light, drawn by invisible hands, glowing softly against the black water. It looks like a great sea turtle, gliding through eternity. Its fins are traced in living light, its shell patterned by the motion of the current. Every time the water moves, the stars on its back ripple and reform, and yet the shape somehow remains. It's not a picture, not truly, more like the sea itself remembering what it once saw in the sky. For ages, sailors on the surface have looked to the stars for direction. But down here, the ocean has its own map written, not in ink, but in movement. Each current redraws it, each tide shifts it, yet the meaning never disappears. The constellations of the sea are living things, breathing with the rhythm of the water. As the turtle fades, another shape emerges nearby. This one smaller, a spiral of plankton that twirls in slow motion. At its center, a single, brighter glow like a heartbeat. The spiral widens, stretches, and soon becomes a luminous shell, curling infinitely inward. A nautilus made of light, drifting through the darkness. It's so faint that only the most patient creatures see it. The snails that crawl slowly across coral, the sea cucumbers resting in the sand. They move without hurry, surrounded by silent spirals of light. If they could dream, perhaps, they would dream of this, of moving forever through glowing seas, without beginning or end. Back in Bikini Bottom, even the homes seemed touched by these constellations. Soft reflections shimmer on the walls, a quiet dance of blue and silver. Inside his rock, Patrick snores gently, the light tracing ripples across his face. In his dream, he floats among enormous glowing shapes, slow and weightless, his arms spread wide as though flying. He smiles faintly, unaware that the lights he dreams of are real, waiting just beyond the reef, painting the dark in their slow, shifting language. Squidward sleeps too, his clarinet resting beside him. The faint glow filters through his porthole, and in his dream he sees it as stage lights shining softly through ocean mist, illuminating a quiet concert where only the sea listens. He plays a single, slow note, and the constellations respond. The jellyfish pulse, the sand ripples, and the sound becomes visible, hanging in the water as a delicate thread of light. For a moment, the stars below move in rhythm with his breath, and then he exhales, and the dream fades, leaving only the stillness of the deep. The ocean doesn't rush. Every motion happens in its own time. The swaying kelp, the curling shells, the slow journey of drifting light. It has no need to hurry because it already contains everything. The past, the present, the quiet waiting of what's to come. The constellations move within it like memories, neither gone nor present, but gently suspended. Along the coral cliffs, tiny creatures peek from their homes. Small crabs, shrimp, and fish watch the glow as it passes by. For them, this is the night sky, the only one they'll ever know. They trace its movements as land dwellers trace the stars, finding patterns that feel familiar and comforting. A trail of plankton might look like a path, a cluster like a home. Perhaps to them, these constellations mean something, a sign that the ocean is watching, that it remembers every living thing within it. Farther out, the light becomes more diffuse. It no longer forms clear shapes, but flows together like liquid silk. Each ripple of the sea paints a new pattern, overlapping the last until all that remains is motion. It's a living tapestry, stars being born and fading at the same time. The deep breathes and the lights respond, 1,000 tiny pulses synchronized by the water's slow heartbeat. Above it all, the moonlight continues to filter down, bending and scattering through the currents. It meets the bioluminescent glow, and together they create something new, not sky, not sea, but a place in between. A twilight realm where everything is both reflected and alive. SpongeBob turns in his sleep again, murmuring softly. In his dream, he floats through that place. The constellations gather around him, and he feels their warmth, not heat, but recognition. The lights seem to know him, as if they've watched him from the beginning, from every night he's spent staring up through the water at the stars above. He drifts slowly past them. There's the sea turtle again, and now beside it, a second constellation in a great bubble-like ring, glowing faintly gold. Inside it, more lights swirl, moving in loops and spirals. SpongeBob reaches out, and the ring shimmers, almost responding to his touch. He feels calm, almost weightless. There are no words here, no sounds, only the pulse of light and the slow turning of the ocean around him. Somewhere beyond the coral ridge, a current stirs. It sweeps through the glowing fields, scattering the constellations like sand in the wind. But the sea doesn't resist. It simply lets the shapes go, knowing they will return in another form, in another tide. That is the way of the ocean, to create, to let go, and to begin again. The stars above are constant. But the stars below are living things, and in their movement lies their beauty. Each time they vanish, they leave behind a memory of light faint but everlasting. Like whispers in water, they echo long after the glow fades, part of the rhythm that keeps the sea alive. Now the plankton drift upward again, drawn by the faint pull of the moon's reflection. Their light softens, stretches, and then begins to scatter. The sea darkens once more, quiet and deep. But even in darkness, something remains, the invisible traces of what was there, still glowing faintly inside the memory of the water. The constellations of the sea never truly disappear. They only rest, waiting for the next wave, the next soft current, the next dream to pass through them and wake their light again. The night deepens, and with it, the line between sky and sea begins to fade. If you look long enough through the still water above Bikini Bottom, it becomes hard to tell where one world ends and the other begins. The stars shimmer faintly through the surface, and their reflections ripple downward until they blend with this glowing plankton that drift in the current. It is as though the ocean has swallowed a piece of the cosmos, holding it gently in its depths. Each faint spark of light trembles with a rhythm, not of the sky, but of the sea's own slow heartbeat. Even silence here feels alive, filled with the movement of unseen things, the quiet breath of a vast, living world. Out beyond the edge of Goo Lagoon, the water lies flat and dark. The moon's reflection stretches far across it, a ribbon of silver light bending with each soft wave. Every crest and trough turns the light into a pattern, a fleeting constellation that appears and disappears with each passing ripple. It is a language older than words, a language written in motion, spoken only by the sea. A gentle current moves through the kelp forests, brushing past long green fronds that sway like arms in sleep. As it passes, the kelp catch and scatter tiny sparks of glowing plankton. The motion paints slow trails of blue light between them, weaving the forest into a cathedral of living stars. The light flows upward, illuminating small fish resting among the leaves. They do not move, they only watch, their eyes reflecting the glow like mirrors of the deep. In these moments, even the smallest movement feels sacred. A single bubble drifts upward from the sand, catching the faint light and splitting it into color. It rises slowly, twisting as it goes, until it reaches the surface and bursts without sound. For a heartbeat, a single point of light vanishes, and then the ocean makes another, as though to replace it. This is the rhythm of the constellations, endless, patient creation. Back near the town, the soft glow still filters through SpongeBob's window. The patterns outside his home have shifted now, no longer the turtle or the spiral shell, but something larger, more intricate. Dozens of faint lights have arranged themselves into the shape of a wave, cresting endlessly but never breaking. Each curve shines with a soft blue shimmer, and at its base, smaller lights flicker like foam. The wave seems to move, rolling gently over Bikini Bottom in complete silence. In his sleep, SpongeBob stirs. His dreams shift again, and now he sees himself standing beneath that wave of light. He lifts his gaze, and the stars above ripple with the same motion. He cannot tell which is reflection and which is real. The sky above him glows like the sea, and the sea below him glows like the sky. He feels a stillness that goes beyond calm, as though the entire universe has paused to breathe beside him. Pat dreams too, somewhere under his rock. He sees a trail of glowing dots stretching into the dark, forming a path across the ocean floor. He begins to follow it, each step gentle and slow. With every movement, the lights ahead brighten, and the ones behind fade. It feels endless yet peaceful, like walking through a field of stars that never runs out. He doesn't know where it leads, and he doesn't need to. For Patrick, the journey itself is enough the slow rhythm of walking through the deep night, surrounded by lights that hum softly in tune with his heartbeat. Above them, Squidward dreams differently. His world of constellations is not soft or scattered. It's ordered, graceful, almost musical. Lines of light connect across the darkness, forming shapes that move in rhythm, like notes on a page. He can almost hear them, a slow rising melody made, not of sound, but of color. The stars pulse with each invisible beat, and as he breathes, the tempo changes. For him, the constellations are a song the sea has always known, one he is finally able to hear. Farther out, beyond jellyfish fields, the constellations begin to grow larger, stretching across whole valleys of coral. Here, light becomes mist, wrapping around pillars of stone and reef. Schools of tiny fish swim through it, scattering it into ribbons of gold and violet. Everywhere, the sea seems to hum a low, resonant vibration that can't quite be heard, only felt. Morning light never reaches this far. Down here, beneath the coral ridges and the drifting sands, the ocean folds into endless night. It is a place without shadows because there is no sun, no moon, no surface light at all. Only the quiet glow that comes from life itself. The glow of the deep. It begins faintly, like a whisper, a single spark floating in the dark. It moves slowly, pulsing with soft blue rhythm. Then another appears, drifting nearby. And another. Soon the water is filled with tiny points of light, each one alive, each one breathing. They don't shine to be seen. They shine because it is how they exist, their way of remembering that they are part of the sea. The deeper you go, the softer the world becomes. Sound doesn't carry here. It moves like a sigh, barely touching the edges of perception. Even the current moves in silence, folding around rocks and forgotten coral structures like a ghost made of water. And through that darkness, the glow drifts on, painting gentle streaks of light that fade almost as soon as they appear. SpongeBob has never been this deep before. In his dream, he floats downward, carried by a current that feels neither cold nor warm. There is no fear, no rush, only an endless curiosity. His body moves without effort, his arms drifting beside him, his eyes wide open, but half asleep. He watches. As the last traces of the upper ocean fade behind him, the blue dissolving into indigo, the indigo into black. Yet even in this blackness he sees color. The light from the creatures below shimmers in slow waves, pale blue, soft green, faint pink. Tiny jelly spheres hover like distant lanterns. Translucent fish glide through the dark, their bodies glowing from within, their eyes like tiny moons. Oh, every motion stirs a trail of brightness that lingers in the water before fading into calm. He drifts past a school of glowing plankton, each one no larger than a grain of sand. Together, they move like a single living cloud, curling and folding into shapes that shift faster than thought. A spiral, a wave, a face that almost looks familiar, then disappears. He reaches out to touch one, and the moment his hand passes through, the plankton scatter, leaving faint trails of light across his fingers. It feels like touching a star. There are no sounds now, only the heartbeat of the deep, that slow, steady rhythm that seems to come from the water itself. It's not something heard, but felt, like the pulse of a dream, like the echo of breathing when the world is still. As he moves deeper, the creatures change. They are stranger now, not like the ones near the surface. Some are shaped like ribbons, long and winding, glowing faintly along their edges. Some are round with soft, pulsing centers that blink like lanterns in a fog. Others look like living glass, almost invisible except for the glow of their organs, tiny flickers of blue and green that move through their bodies like sparks through a wire. And yet nothing here feels frightening. The darkness is vast, but it is not empty. It feels full of memory, full of presence, full of something ancient and endlessly gentle. SpongeBob senses that this is the ocean's oldest place where every forgotten dream drifts to rest, where every story whispered by the tides comes to sleep. A faint current rises from below, wrapping around him like a slow breath. It carries faint particles of glowing dust, remnants of long-lost coral, and shell fragments that still hold a trace of light. They swirl around him like a soft storm of stars, settling on his arms, his face, his clothes. For a brief moment, he looks like part of the deep, another creature of light among the endless dark. Somewhere far beneath him, something stirs. A vast shadow moves slowly, not menacingly, but with purpose. It's an enormous manta ray, its wings stretching wider than any ship. It glides silently through the black, his edges lined with faint silver light, like a moving horizon. SpongeBob watches it pass, awed by its grace. Each flap of its wings sends ripples of brightness through the surrounding water, like waves of moonlight spreading across a midnight sea. He drifts closer. The manta ray doesn't seem to mind. It moves around him in a slow circle, its great eye glowing faintly gold for a moment, before fading back into blue. There's an understanding there, not in words, but in stillness. The deep speaks through silence, and SpongeBob listens. He follows as the ray glides lower, deeper, into the darker part of the sea. The glow intensifies here. The water seems alive with veins of light running across the rocks and the sand. Faint trails of luminescence twist along the seabed, connecting everything coral, shell, creature, current, into one great living network of glow. It looks almost like the constellations he saw above, but these are different. These are not reflections of the sky. These are the constellations of life itself glowing from within the ocean's heart. He can feel it, a low hum, a vibration through the water, soft and continuous. It's as if the deep is breathing, each exhale sending new patterns of light across the seabed. Every pulse reveals something new, a colony of glowing anemones, swaying like candles, a field of translucent coral that bends gently in the current, a school of ribbonfish drawing long arcs of light as they move in perfect unison. For a moment, SpongeBob forgets everything, the crusty crab, his pineapple home, even the surface above. There is only this world of light and quiet motion, endless and serene. He realizes that the deeper he goes, the softer everything feels. Even thought seems to dissolve into the rhythm of the sea. There's no need to speak, no need to move quickly. Just breathe and drift and glow. He reaches the edge of a vast underwater valley. Below, the darkness deepens again, but this time, it's not empty. He can see tiny pulses of light flickering along the walls of the trench, forming trails that descend into infinity. It's like looking into the Milky Way of the sea. The glow is faint but infinite, stretching far beyond what the eye can follow. SpongeBob hesitates for a moment, suspended in stillness. Then he exhales, and the current carries him downward into the glowing heart of the deep. The current carries SpongeBob deeper, the light from above fading into nothing. Now only the glow remains soft, living, endless. He feels weightless, as if time itself has stopped. Each breath moves through him like the tide, slow and gentle, joining the rhythm of the sea. The valley walls rise on either side, towering like the walls of a cathedral carved from shadow. And across them, veins of light flow, thin lines that pulse with soft blue and violet hues. It's as though the rock itself is alive, breathing in quiet unison with the deep. The light moves slowly downward, guiding him deeper still, like a map written in starlight. Tiny creatures cling to the glowing stone. They open and close like flowers, releasing clouds of luminescent dust that drift upward in slow motion. The dust gathers into patterns that look almost deliberate swirling galaxies that fade as soon as they're formed. Each flake glows for only a few seconds, but in that moment, it lights the entire valley floor. SpongeBob watches them with awe. The deeper he drifts, the quieter it becomes, so quiet that he can hear the faint hum of his own heartbeat echo through the water. Even the sound of his breathing feels distant, like a memory. It's as though the ocean itself is listening, holding every sound carefully in its arms. He glides over a stretch of sand that shimmers faintly, as if dusted with diamonds. When he brushes his hand across it, the particles respond, glowing brighter where he touches, leaving a trail of light behind. It's as if the sand remembers his touch, holding on to that moment of connection. He draws a small circle, and for a while it stays a tiny ring of light glowing gently before fading away. Then from the edge of the valley, a movement. A soft, flowing shape drifts closer, not swimming, but gliding, as though carried by thought alone. It's a creature unlike anything SpongeBob has ever seen. Its body is almost transparent, and its light pulses in gentle waves that ripple outward like the rings on water. It circles him slowly, curious but calm, its glowing pattern shifting from blue to soft amber. SpongeBob smiles. He doesn't know what it is, but it feels peaceful, ancient, even wise. The creature pauses for a moment in front of him, and their lights seem to echo each other, pulsing in rhythm. Then, with one slow flick of its fins, it moves on, vanishing into the folds of darkness, leaving only faint trails of gold behind. He watches the light fade until it becomes one with the glow around him. Then he drifts onward, deeper still. Now the valley floor begins to rise again, forming gentle ridges that stretch into the distance. Each ridge glows faintly, lined with what looks like coral made of glass. The coral bends with the current, shimmering with light that moves from within, like the heartbeat of the sea. It's an entire garden of luminescence, alive, breathing, whispering in colors that don't exist above. As he floats through it, the coral's light seems to react to his presence. Each piece brightens slightly as he passes, casting soft halos across his face and clothes. He doesn't touch anything. He doesn't need to. The glow reaches toward him, brushing against his arms and hands like soft threads of silk. For a moment, he closes his eyes. He can feel the water move, slow and endless around him. He can hear the faint hum, not just from the coral now, but from everything. The glow has a sound. Not one that can be heard, but one that can be felt deep inside the chest. It's the sound of the deep remembering itself. He drifts past a structure that looks like a forest, tall, thin stalks of crystal coral rising high, their tips glowing pale white. Between them, Small creatures move spiraling, looping, dancing in the water. Some have glowing trails behind them, like ribbons of light that twist and weave together. It's a dance with no beginning and no end. Each movement creates new patterns only to fade and begin again. There's something strangely familiar about it, like music, but seen instead of heard. Each creature's glow pulses in time, creating harmonies of color that play across the coral forest. SpongeBob feels his thoughts quiet completely. There's no need to understand, only to feel. He floats among them, weightless and calm, watching as the glowing patterns unfold around him. Sometimes they form shapes, spirals, arcs, clusters of light that resemble the constellations he saw above the reef. But these are not stars. These are living things, small, bright souls of the deep, each carrying its own quiet light. A current moves through the forest, soft and steady, carrying with it faint particles that shimmer like snow. They fall in slow motion, settling over the coral tips and the glowing creatures, softening their edges. The water becomes hazy with light, like a dream made visible. SpongeBob reaches out again, and the particles cling to his fingers. They glow faintly, then dissolve into the water. He laughs softly, not a real laugh, but the sound of wonder. The quiet kind that happens only in dreams. Then as he drifts further, the coral forest begins to thin. The ground below slopes downward again, leading toward a vast open space that glows faintly gold. It's different from the rest of the deep, warmer, softer, like a memory turned into light. The current carries him toward it slowly, as though the sea itself wants him to see what waits below. The golden glow grows stronger, pulsing gently through the dark. It feels alive, not bright, but powerful, a heartbeat that touches everything in reach. Even the distant coral bends toward it slightly, as if drawn by gravity made of light. SpongeBob drifts closer, his eyes wide with quiet awe. The deeper he goes, the more he begins to feel it, the deep's pulse merging with his own. It's not frightening, not overwhelming. It feels like coming home. The golden glow grows stronger, spreading across the valley floor like dawn in reverse light, blooming upward instead of down. SpongeBob drifts closer, and the current slows as if time itself wants to hold him still for a moment. Below him lies something vast, a wide plain of smooth stone, covered in faintly pulsing patterns. At first it looks like coral, but as his eyes adjust, he realizes it's something older. It's alive, but not moving. It glows, but not like the jellyfish or the plankton. And this light feels steady, ancient, the kind of glow that has been here since before the sea had names. SpongeBob hovers above it, arms drifting at his sides, eyes wide in quiet awe. Every pulse of light runs in gentle waves across the surface, forming circular ripples that spread and fade into the dark. And with each pulse, the entire valley seems to respond. The coral lights flicker, the plankton drift closer, the deep hum grows a little louder. It's as if this glowing plain is the ocean's heart, and every creature in the deep beats in rhythm with it. He drifts lower until his feet brush the soft, glowing surface. It feels warm, not hot, not cold, but alive. Like holding your hand over a sleeping creature's chest and feeling its slow, steady breathing. He kneels down gently, pressing one hand to the light. It pulses once beneath his palm. Faint at first, then stronger. For a moment, he feels something move through him. It isn't a sound, not even a thought, more like a memory without words. Images flicker behind his eyes, glowing reefs, drifting whales, ancient coral cities that no longer exist. He sees plankton, swirling in eternal spirals, jellyfish migrating through invisible highways of current, kelp forests rising and falling like tides of breath. He sees it all not as separate things, but as one endless motion, one life, one light. He exhales slowly. The light beneath his hand responds, glowing brighter for a moment, then calming again. It's as if the deep has acknowledged him, a quiet greeting, a soft hello from something far older than time. A faint vibration ripples through the water, low and soothing. It hums through the valley floor, through the coral ridges, through SpongeBob's body, through everything. The glow pulses in response, slow, rhythmic, like the ocean breathing in unison. SpongeBob looks up and sees that the plankton have gathered in vast swirls above him, forming soft spirals that twist and stretch toward the darkness above. The manta ray he met earlier glides overhead, its silver edge catching the glow and scattering it in long, sweeping waves. Even the smallest creatures, glowing shrimp, ribbonfish, and translucent eels, drift into the pattern, moving together as if drawn by the same invisible rhythm. The deep is alive, not as many things, but as one. Every light, every breath, every motion is connected. And SpongeBob can feel it, not with his mind, but with something deeper, quieter. He feels his heartbeat slow to match the ocean's. He feels his thoughts dissolve into the hum of the sea. For the first time, there's no difference between himself and the water around him. He floats up slowly, letting the current carry him in lazy circles above the glowing plain. From here, the view stretches endlessly, waves of gold and blue fading into darkness, dotted with moving lights like drifting stars. Each pulse of light from below sends ripples through the water, illuminating hidden ridges and deep trenches that stretch far beyond sight. It looks like the surface of another world, a world turned inside out, glowing from its core. SpongeBob watches, still and weightless, as faint patterns form on the glowing ground below, circles, spirals, paths of light that connect and fade. It reminds him of the constellations above the reef, but these are deeper, slower. They don't tell stories of heroes or legends. They tell stories of time of growth, of movement, of quiet creation. The current shifts again, moving through the valley like a sigh. Particles of glowing dust lift from the plain, rising into the water around him. They swirl, soft and lazy, catching the golden light as they drift upwards. The entire valley looks like a snowstorm made of stars. Each glowing flake moves differently, but together they create one single dance, random yet perfectly in tune. SpongeBob turns slowly in the current, letting the dust drift past his face. He can feel their warmth, faint but real. Each one carries a tiny pulse like a miniature heartbeat. It's as though the deep itself is shedding its memories, letting them float freely into the dark. He wonders how many ages of the ocean. The sea has grown lighter now. Not bright, not yet, but washed with faint silver. The kind that doesn't shine but glows softly through the water. It's a light that feels ancient, older than any creature that swims beneath it. SpongeBob drifts upward through it, slow and peaceful, his limbs moving only when the current shifts. The deep below has vanished into blue shadow, but he can still sense it there, humming quietly like a memory in the back of his mind. The glow he carried from those depths is dimmed, yet it hasn't disappeared. It lingers faintly beneath his skin, like embers that refuse to cool. Above him, the silver light spreads wider, rippling softly as it filters through the surface. It wavers with each passing current, bending into long ribbons that stretch and twist through the water. When he looks closely, he can see small flecks of plankton drifting in those beams, thousands of tiny motes, each one catching the light for a moment before fading back into shadow. The ocean around him feels slower now, gentler. He hears the distant groan of a whale, the sound spreading through the water like a heartbeat too large to understand. Then silence again. A silence that isn't empty. It's the kind that feels full, like the ocean is listening to itself. SpongeBob floats with his arms out, the tips of his fingers brushing against faint trails of bubbles. Each bubble rises lazily toward the surface, reflecting the silver glow above. He follows one with his eyes, watching as it climbs, smaller and smaller, until it disappears into the shimmer. The sight fills him with something quiet and sweet. He doesn't have a word for it, but it feels a little like hope, and a little like remembering something from a dream. He looks up again. Through the wavering silver, he can see the moon distant, blurred yet still whole. It hangs above the water like a lantern behind glass, pale and steady. Each wave on the surface distorts it slightly, stretching and shrinking its reflection, breaking it into soft pieces before forming it again. It's not just light, it's alive, breathing with the rhythm of the sea. The moonlight spills down in thin threads, weaving across his face, his hands as square sleeves. It turns the water around him into a shifting quilt of brightness and shadow. And for a moment, SpongeBob feels as though he's floating inside the moon itself, not beneath it, but within its glow. A small school of transparent fish swims by, their scales catching the light and scattering it like broken mirrors. They move in silence, each turning perfectly with the others, guided by something unseen. When they pass through the moonbeams, they seem to disappear entirely, their bodies blending with the shimmer until they're nothing but flashes of silver motion. SpongeBob watches, transfixed. It's like watching thoughts drift by, fleeting, delicate, impossible to hold. He stretches one hand forward, letting the light touch his palm. It flickers softly against his skin. It doesn't feel warm or cold. It feels peaceful, like the stillness between heartbeats. He wonders if the moon can see him too. If it looks down through all that distance, through water and waves and clouds, and recognizes the small creatures drifting far below. Maybe it does. Maybe the moon remembers the ocean. Maybe it always has. He closes his eyes for a moment and listens. And there's no sound but the slow, deep pulse of the water and the faint pop of distant bubbles. The sea moves differently here. It doesn't roll like it does near the surface, and it doesn't hum like it does in the deep. Here the current drifts in quiet spirals, rising and sinking like the slow turn of sleep. SpongeBob breathes slow, deep, steady. He can feel the rhythm of it aligning with the water's motion. Each breath feels longer than the last, each exhale gentler. He isn't trying to swim anymore. He's just floating, existing. The silver light thickens as he nears the surface. Now the beams dance more sharply, glinting off the tiny scales of passing shrimp, the edges of coral branches, the sand below. Everything glows a little. Even the shadows are soft. He glances downward. The deep is still there, vast and quiet, but its glow is hidden now beneath layers of blue. The world has changed again. Where the deep hummed, the upper sea whispers. It's the same voice, just speaking softer now. He turns onto his back, facing the silver ceiling above. The moon's reflection trembles gently as he moves, sending ripples of light cascading outward. It feels close enough to touch. He reaches out a hand, not to grab it, just to trace the pattern of its glow. The water between his fingers splits the light into hundreds of tiny moons, each one shining for a heartbeat before dissolving. He laughs softly, though no sound escapes. It's the kind of laugh that comes from wonder, not humor, the quiet joy of seeing something too beautiful to explain. He wonders if Patrick is asleep right now, maybe lying on his rock, snoring softly under the same moonlight. If Squidward's window catches that glow, painting his clarinet in pale silver. If even Plankton, somewhere in his lab, looks up for a second and notices the light on the floor. The moon, after all, belongs to everyone, even those who don't look up to see it. SpongeBob closes his eyes again. He can still see the silver glow behind his eyelids, shimmering like the memory of light. It feels like the ocean is breathing through him, slow and closer to rest. The moon waits above, patient and still. It doesn't move fast like the sun or flicker like the stars. It just stays a soft guardian over the waves. And below, SpongeBob drifts in its quiet reflection, halfway between dream and waking. He doesn't need to know where he's going next. The water knows. The moon knows. All he has to do is breathe and let it carry him. As SpongeBob drifts upward, the water begins to thin, not physically, but in feeling. The light grows stronger here, more defined, and the moon's reflection spreads wider, shimmering like liquid glass above him. The silver glow deepens into long bands that slide gently across the sand below. Each ripple seems alive, moving in perfect rhythm with the pulse of the tide. He passes over a ridge of coral dusted in pale light. The colors, normally bright in the daytime, now sleep beneath a film of moon silver. Soft blues, faded pinks, ghostly greens, all touched by the same quiet glow. Tiny fish hide in the cracks, their tails flicking lazily as they rest. One blinks, eyes reflecting a glint of moonlight before closing again. Even the sea seems to exhale here. Above, the moon bends and stretches with the rolling surface. Its reflection ripples across the water, dividing and rejoining again, never breaking, just changing shape endlessly. SpongeBob watches it as he floats, his gaze soft and unblinking. It's strange, he thinks, how something so far away can still touch everything down here. He feels the water grow cooler. The surface is close now. He can tell by the faint sound, a hush that isn't a sound at all, but a feeling, like the breath of the ocean, just before it breaks into air. He slows his rise, letting the current cradle him. No rush. The moon isn't going anywhere. Below him, the reef stretches toward Bikini Bottom. From this height, the little town glows faintly, outlined in scattered pockets of light. The windows of SpongeBob's pineapple shimmer with faint phosphorescence, a ghostly echo of daytime warmth. Patrick's rock is still peaceful, the sand around it marked with the faint grooves of where he rolled in his sleep. Squidward's house gleams a pale blue, its edges softened by drifting seagrass. Even the Krusty Krab can be seen in the distance, its sign barely visible through the silvery haze. Everything sleeps. Everything breathes. The moonlight spills across the town like a blanket, wrapping each roof, each coral chimney, each sleeping creature in quiet silver. The shadows are long and gentle, no sharp edges, no darkness that feels unfriendly. just peace. The kind of peace that only comes when the world stops trying to stay awake. SpongeBob drifts toward the rooftops, moving through the soft current that flows between them. He passes a jellyfish gliding silently by, its body pulsing with faint blue light. They move together for a while, side by side, like travelers who don't need to speak. The jellyfish drifts upward, joining the moon's reflection until its glow becomes part of it. SpongeBob watches it fade and smiles. He looks toward his own home. From here, the pineapple looks almost magical. Its golden skin glimmering faintly, the windows flickering with the light that filters through the water. Inside, everything is still. Gary is curled in his bed, eyes closed, his little shell reflecting a ring of moonlight that dances with each ripple from the tide. Bubbles rise from the edge of SpongeBob's window, tiny and steady, like the ocean's way of whispering goodnight. He doesn't go inside. He just watches quietly. Sometimes it's enough to simply see your home resting peacefully in the moonlight. Sometimes that's all you need to feel safe. He turns his gaze back upward. The moon is brighter now, a full, perfect circle. Its glow reaches deep, silver threads falling like slow-moving rain. He tilts his head and lets the light wash across his face. In it, he feels warmth and distance at once. The light is cool, but the feeling behind it is old, a comfort that has watched over oceans long before Bikini Bottom existed. A gentle current passes through, stirring the sand beneath him. Grains swirl upward like stars, joining the beams of moonlight before falling back down again. The movement reminds SpongeBob of snow, not the kind that freezes, but the kind that quiets everything it touches. He imagines the ocean snowing with light, each flake drifting slow and weightless. He floats through it, his hands brushing softly through the shimmer. The world around him feels painted in calm of voices. No rush, only the soft hum of the tide and the faraway glimmer of the moon. Even time seems slower here, stretching like the light itself. Somewhere above, a shadow glides across the moon. A sea turtle, enormous and ancient, moving through the upper waters with the steady grace of something that has seen centuries. Its shell catches the light, not reflecting it sharply, but soaking it in, glowing faintly as it passes. SpongeBob watches it drift, awed by its slowness. It moves as though it has nowhere to go and all the time in the world to get there. He wonders where it came from. Maybe from the deep. Maybe from beyond the reef. Maybe it's just always been here. When the turtle vanishes into the silver haze, SpongeBob feels the water settle again. He closes his eyes and drifts, letting the last ripples carry him gently toward the surface. He's so close now that the moon's reflection dances directly above him, trembling like a living thing. He could almost reach it, but he doesn't. He knows that it's not something to catch. It's something to float beneath. He opens his eyes once more. Tiny creatures sparkle in the water around him. Plankton, shrimp, bits of coral dust all caught in the moonlight, all glowing softly as they rise and fall with the tide. The water feels alive, every drop glimmering with motion and memory. It's as if the ocean itself is remembering the stars. SpongeBob takes a deep, slow breath. He doesn't need air, not here, not in the way surface creatures do, but the motion feels right. It feels like breathing with the sea. And when he exhales, the bubbles rise toward the moon, each one reflecting the world in miniature. For a second, it looks as though 1,000 tiny moons are drifting upward, each carrying a whisper of the deep below. He smiles again softly and lets himself drift in the quiet silver. No destination, no thought. Just the moon, the water, and the stillness between them. The current guides SpongeBob gently toward the open space beyond his home. The landscape of Bikini Bottom stretches out before him, but it looks different now, softer, dreamlike. The moonlight spreads over everything like a thin layer of glass, turning every rock and coral stem into a glimmering sculpture. Even the sand seems alive, glowing faintly where tiny grains catch the light and drift in slow spirals. He passes the jellyfish fields. By day, they shimmer pink and blue. By night, they glow faint violet, pulsing quietly with the rhythm of the tide. Thousands of jellyfish hover there, perfectly still, their tendrils floating like threads of light in the calm water. They look like stars, suspended in slow motion. Each pulse of their glow rises and fades in unison, a silent heartbeat that ripples through the entire field. SpongeBob pauses, watching, mesmerized. The world feels so alive, yet so silent. He wonders if this is how the moon sees the sea every night, not full of noise or motion, but full of slow, breathing light. He moves closer to the ground, brushing past soft coral fronds that sway like grass under a breeze. Tiny sea flowers open and close, reacting to the faint motion of the water. A small snail crawls along a shell, its eyes reflecting the moon like twin pearls. SpongeBob smiles quietly. Every small thing feels important tonight. Every shadow seems kind. Ahead, the familiar outline of the Krusty Krab appears, its curved roof gleaming silver under the moonlight, its windows pale and quiet. The sign above the door sways gently with the current, creaking just enough to echo softly through the stillness. No one is there, no customer, no sizzling grill, no laughter or chatter. Only stillness. Only peace. SpongeBob floats closer, hovering outside the front door. He presses his hand softly to the glass and peers inside. The tables are empty, neatly arranged. The register sits silent, a thin line of moonlight cutting across its surface. Even the friars gleam faintly, reflecting the silver beams that filter through the cracks in the wooden walls. The silence doesn't feel lonely. It feels sacred, like the restaurant itself is dreaming. He drifts back, letting his hand fall away. A single bubble escapes his glove and rises upward, twisting lazily before breaking against the moonlight above. He watches it go, imagining that it carries the scent of the Krabby Patties he's cooked, the laughter of the customers, the sound of the bell on the door, memories rising to join the stars. SpongeBob continues drifting through the quiet streets. The moonlight follows him, sliding over the rooftops, catching on every corner and curve of the coral buildings. The shadows move too, bending and curling like soft ribbons. It feels as though the entire town is breathing with him, one slow, endless rhythm. He passes Squidward's house again. Through the tall windows, he can see the outline of his neighbor sleeping, clarinet resting beside him. The moonlight filters in through the glass, scattering into thin silver lines that cross his floor like a web. SpongeBob smiles softly. Even in dreams, he imagines Squidward hears music, the kind that doesn't come from instruments, but from the sea itself, the gentle hum that rises when the world is perfectly still. Further ahead, Patrick's rock sits peacefully on the sand, glowing faint pink in the moonlight. SpongeBob floats near it, quiet and slow, careful not to disturb anything. Patrick's soft snore rumbles faintly from beneath, muffled by layers of rock and water. It's a comforting sound, steady, deep, like a tide rolling in and out. He stays there for a long moment, just listening. There's something deeply soothing about knowing that your best friend is asleep and safe under the same moonlight. He finally moves on, carried by the water's rhythm. Beyond Bikini Bottom, the seafloor opens into a wide plain of smooth sand. Here, the moonlight stretches farther, unbroken by buildings or coral. The surface shimmer above reflects perfectly below two moons, one real, one rippling softly in the sand. SpongeBob floats between them, halfway between sky and earth, between dream and waking. He stretches his arms out and spins slowly, watching the world blur into motion. Light, shadow, silence, glow. The movement stirs the sand beneath him into tiny spirals that drift upward like smoke. Each grain catches the moonlight and turns to silver dust before falling again. The effect is so gentle that it feels like he's inside a snow globe made of water and time. He slows, then stills, letting himself drift again. In the distance, he sees the faint outline of the chum bucket, its metal surface catching the light like a dull mirror. For once, it doesn't look harsh or cold. The rough edges soften under the moon's touch, turning smooth and almost graceful. He can even see a faint glimmer from inside Plankton's lab lights dimmed, his machines at rest. Maybe even he has fallen asleep. Maybe even his dreams are glowing quietly somewhere behind that glass. Water hums faintly around SpongeBob, a sound too low to hear but strong enough to feel. It's as though the moonlight itself vibrates through the sea, slow waves of calm, moving through coral and shell, and following invisible loops written into the water. The world was no longer quite real. It was soft around the edges, hazy and blurred, like the space between thoughts. SpongeBob could feel the water thickening slightly, not heavy, but dense, full of echoes. Every motion of his hand left a trail of faint light behind, a soft golden shimmer that faded after a few seconds. He didn't know if it was plankton glowing, or simply his imagination reaching outward. Either way, it felt like the ocean was beginning to respond, not as water, but as something alive, aware and gentle. He let his body go limp, trusting the current completely. The sea carried him without effort, rocking him side to side like a cradle. His eyelids fluttered, but he didn't fight it. Somewhere in the distance, a low hum vibrated through the deep, not from a creature, not from movement, but from the sea itself. It was the kind of sound that wasn't quite a sound, a vibration, that you didn't hear so much as feel through your bones. The hum grew softer, spreading outward, echoing through the valleys and ridges below. It was as if the ocean had started singing a lullaby to itself. SpongeBob smiled faintly, his thoughts slowing until they dissolved into single images. A jellyfish drifting through moonlight, a coral fan opening and closing like a sleepy eye, bubbles rising like tiny stars. His body tilted backward until he was lying flat on the water's surface, staring upward through the thin veil between sea and sky. Above him, the constellations shimmered faintly, but they too seemed to waver, their edges softening, their light bending into shapes he didn't quite recognize. The stars rearranged themselves slowly, forming patterns that felt familiar outlines of his friends, the Krusty Krab. Jellyfish fields all fading and reforming again, as though the sky were remembering his dreams before he did. Time began to stretch. Minutes no longer felt like minutes. The movement of the waves seemed to slow to the rhythm of his heartbeat, and then even that became uncertain. It was impossible to tell whether he was floating for seconds or centuries. Only the rhythm remained, the steady rise and fall, the pulse of the sea, the whisper of his own breath. Then quietly, something began to change. The water below him grew darker, not with shadow but with depth, a velvet blue that felt infinite. From that darkness, faint glows began to appear, small circles of light, like bubbles, but brighter. They rose slowly, spinning lazily in spirals as they drifted upward. Each one shimmered with soft, muted colors, blue, gold, pink, green, blending into one another like fragments of forgotten dreams. SpongeBob reached out, letting one of the orbs touch his palm. It didn't feel like water or air, it felt like nothing at all, weightless but warm, leaving a tiny sparkle where it touched him. Inside the glow, for just a moment, he saw something, a memory maybe, or a reflection. Patrick laughing beside his rock and bubbles drifting through the air. Then the light faded, dissolving back into the sea. More of them rose now, dozens, hundreds, a slow galaxy of underwater starlight. They filled the water around him, floating upward until the surface shimmered with color. Each light moved at its own pace, but together they formed a silent rhythm, like breathing or waves, or the slow pulse of a dream. SpongeBob watched in wonder as the orbs brushed against one another, merging and splitting apart again. Each time they touched, they made the faintest sound, a note so soft it was almost felt more than heard. Together, the sounds created a melody, slow, endless, and completely at peace. It was the kind of song that couldn't be written or remembered. It existed only in that moment, in the drift between waking and sleep. He turned his head slightly and noticed shapes forming in the glow, not solid, but outlined shadows of the familiar and the imagined. A field of jellyfish drifting through a sky of liquid silver, a slow-moving whale gliding past a sunken hill, and further beyond, tiny bubbles forming patterns that looked almost like words written in another language, one made of water and light. The current shifted again, and SpongeBob felt himself gently turning, slowly being drawn downward. Not far, just enough for the world above to become distant, the moonlight dimming into mist. The colors deepened around him. The glowing orbs followed, some fading into the dark, others bursting softly into trails of glittering dust that curled like smoke. The melody grew fainter, replaced by a sound like slow breathing, the sea inhaling and exhaling. Each breath felt like a tide. Each pause felt like silence stretched into forever. SpongeBob closed his eyes. Behind his eyelids, the same colors swirled, blues, greens, pinks, and then shapes began to form again. Not just the sea now, but scenes from his memories. SpongeBob sitting on the steps of the Krusty Krab after closing time, watching bubbles rise to the surface. The sound of Squidward's clarinet echoing through the evening. Patrick lying on his back, humming to himself under the stars. But they didn't stay as memories for long. They blurred, melted, and transformed, the Krusty Krab becoming a glowing shell, the clarinet song turning into whale calls, Patrick's rock lifting slowly into the air like a cloud. It was all familiar, yet dreamlike, a version of Bikini Bottom, seen through sleep's reflection. He smiled again, his chest rising and falling with the rhythm of the waves. He didn't try to understand what was real or not. He simply drifted deeper, following the current wherever it wanted to go, letting the dream carry him. The water around SpongeBob seemed to hum softly, like the faint vibration of a seashell held to the ear. It wasn't music exactly, not made of notes, but a kind of endless resonance, the sound of everything breathing together. Each pulse of the ocean carried through his body, up his arms, into his chest, until he couldn't tell where his heartbeat ended and the seas began. He drifted deeper into that feeling. The world above disappeared entirely. Only the glowing mist remained, swirling like fog made of light. Sometimes it pulsed with color, sometimes it dimmed, always in rhythm, always in time. It reminded him of the jellyfish feel, where the air would shimmer with their movements, the whole sky moving as one living thing. From the darkness ahead, a faint shape appeared. At first, it looked like a ribbon of silver light. But as it drew closer, SpongeBob saw it was a school of tiny fish, thousands of them, moving in perfect harmony. Their scales shimmered like threads of moonlight, weaving patterns through the water. They moved around him, not touching, but close enough for him to feel the current of their passing. The fish circled once, then again. Each rotation created a spiral of light that drifted outward, expanding slowly until it disappeared into the deep. For a moment, SpongeBob felt as if he were at the center of a galaxy, the fish-like stars orbiting in slow motion, the current, their silent song. He turned gently in the water, following their movement, with wide, wondering eyes. The spiral began to rise, the fish forming a long, glowing column that stretched upward towards the moonlit surface. He could see their reflections in the faint silver light above two worlds mirroring each other, one of air, one of water, both endlessly circling. He smiled again, barely. Everything felt connected. The stars, the sea, the fish, even his own slow breath. It was as if the ocean were showing him a secret, not in words, but in movement. The current shifted again, gentle as a sigh. The spiral thinned, its light dissolving into mist. Now the sea around him filled with drifting shapes, not fish, not coral, but something between memory and dream. They looked like outlines of places he knew, half-formed from shadow and light. The crusty crab appeared for an instant, but its sign glowed like a lantern, and bubbles floated where customers once stood. Then it melted away. Next came his pineapple house, its windows round and luminous like eyes. Inside, he could see faint movement, a figure of himself asleep in bed, rising and falling with each breath. The sight made him feel oddly warm to see himself sleeping peacefully, inside a dream that floated through another dream. When he blinked, the image broke apart into tiny golden fragments, drifting into the distance like sand through light. The sea darkened slightly, though not with fear, more like night turning deeper, softer. A voice seemed to echo through it, gentle and familiar. It wasn't speaking any words he knew, but the tone reminded him of something. The way the ocean sounded outside his window at night, the way Gary purred before sleep, the faint hum of life continuing. He listened, and the sound folded around him. Each vibration traced patterns through the water circles, within circles, until it was surrounded by living geometry made of sound. The shapes pulsed in color, blue, violet, and faint gold. They weren't solid, yet he could feel them, like warmth or memory brushing against him. Then the sound shifted again, stretching into something closer to melody. He could almost make out a rhythm, the gentle thum. Thum. Thum of a heartbeat echoing through the deep. It wasn't his own. It was bigger, older, like the heart of the ocean itself, pulsing beneath all time. Each beat released a breath of bubbles that rose, glittering faintly before vanishing into the silver haze. SpongeBob followed the sound downward, drawn by curiosity more than intention. The deeper he went, the softer everything became. Colors fading into one another, light turning to whisper. His thoughts slowed further, each one dissolving before it could form. He wasn't thinking anymore, he was remembering, but without words. He remembered laughter, Patrick's laughter, echoing like bubbles. He remembered Squidward's clarinet, the notes floating through the evening water. He remembered Mr. Krabs counting coins, each clink sharp and bright, followed by silence. But in the dream, those sounds became something else, the laughter a wave, the clarinet a ribbon of blue, the coins tiny stars falling through the dark. He realized that every memory had a color, every sound had emotion. The whole sea seemed to be painted with his past, each stroke drifting through time. He reached out as a single bubble passed his face, glowing faintly green. Inside it, for a moment, he saw himself younger, maybe, or simply happier flipping Krabby Patties with a perfect rhythm while singing softly to himself. He watched, smiling until the bubble rose and burst, scattering light across the current. The dream deepened. The water became warmer now, glowing with amber tones that rippled like candlelight. It reminded him of late evenings inside the Krusty Krab, when the last customers were gone and the only sound was the gentle hiss of the grill cooling down. He floated through that warmth, feeling safe, unhurried, wrapped in the quiet pulse of everything familiar. Then, just as he was beginning to drift completely, a single jellyfish appeared ahead of him. It glowed more brightly than the rest of the sea, trailing long threads of light behind it. Each thread shimmered with faint symbols, tiny shapes like letters, like stories written in the language of the deep. The jellyfish moved slowly, gracefully, its body pulsing with soft rhythm, each glow perfectly timed with the distant heartbeat of the ocean. SpongeBob followed. He didn't swim, he simply drifted, carried by the same invisible current. The jellyfish led him through arches of coral made of light, through fields of floating color that moved like breath. Everywhere he looked, the world pulsed with silent communication, a conversation between sea and sky, between dream and memory. He felt somehow that the jellyfish understood where he needed to go, not forward, not deeper, but inward. He let go of everything, his shape, his name, even the thought of himself. He was simply part of the sea now, moving with it. The dream was no longer something he watched, it was something he was. The jellyfish led SpongeBob onward through a realm that seemed to breathe with its own quiet light. The deeper they went, the more the sea itself glowed not bright, but gentle, like moonlight filtered through glass. The shapes of the reef, the sand, even the shadows softened until there were no edges left. Everything flowed into everything else, as if the ocean had forgotten where it ended. SpongeBob drifted behind the jellyfish, his body weightless, his thoughts reduced to simple awareness. The rhythm of light, the sound of the current, the warmth of being held by something infinite. He had no sense of time now. Every pulse of the jellyfish's glow stretched forever, fading into the next like an endless sigh. The sea was dreaming, and he was part of that dream. The path ahead opened into a vast, slow-moving cloud of color. Each ripple shimmered between blue and violet, with threads of soft gold weaving through like veins of light. Tiny bubbles drifted upward from the center of the glow, thousands of them, each carrying a faint image inside. SpongeBob looked closer. Inside one bubble, he saw the outline of jellyfish fields at sunset. Inside another, the faint glimmer of the Krusty Krab's neon sign flickering through the night. In another, his own reflection, smiling faintly, his eyes calm. The bubbles rose past him in a silent parade, vanishing into the silver mist above. He realized they were memories, floating upward like stars released from the deep. Every creature, every grain of sand, every echo of laughter in Bikini Bottom, it all drifted upward eventually, becoming part of this endless sea of light. He watched them go, and it didn't feel sad. It felt natural, like waves returning to the shore. The jellyfish pulsed once, and SpongeBob followed. They moved through a corridor of glowing kelp, each blade swaying in slow motion. The kelp released trails of phosphorescent dust that hung in the water like tiny constellations. When he brushed one with his hand, it drifted apart into soft spirals, reforming moments later. Even the smallest movement here seemed to last forever, carried gently by invisible tides. The sound of the sea deepened no longer just a hum, but a layered chorus of tones, long and low, vibrating softly through the water. Each sound had weight, a slow pulse that moved through his chest and arms, like the heartbeat he'd felt earlier, steady, timeless. The music didn't come from any direction. It was everywhere. It wasn't something he was hearing. It was something he was inside of. He thought for a moment that he saw faces in the glow-soft outlines of fish, coral, perhaps even people drifting past like smoke. They smiled faintly, not at him, but through him, as though they saw what he was seeing from another dream entirely. He felt no fear, only recognition, like meeting someone he'd known forever but forgotten until now. Each one left a trail of light that lingered long after they disappeared. The jellyfish slowed, stopping in the middle of a great open space. The light around them began to pulse in rhythm with its body brighter, dimmer, brighter again, as if the sea itself was breathing in time. SpongeBob hovered quietly, watching. The glow spread outward in ripples, forming great circles of gold that faded into blue, then back again. It reminded him of ripples on the surface of a calm pond, only here the pond was infinite, and the ripples never stopped. He felt the water move around him, not like a current, but like a whisper. It brushed against his arms, his face, his chest, a soft, invisible touch. It was warm now, carrying with it the faint scent of salt, and something sweeter, the scent of fresh kelp and coral blooming after a storm. The sensation filled him completely. It wasn't just the ocean around him anymore. It was the ocean within him, moving through every thought, every feeling, every memory. He looked up and saw the bubbles again, smaller now, but more numerous. They rose from the ocean floor like a slow snowfall turned upside down. Each one shimmered faintly as it passed, brushing against him, leaving tiny trails of light across his skin. Some of them carried faint sounds, laughter, voices, music so soft they could almost be mistaken for imagination. He could feel them. They were the memories of the ocean itself, the endless hum of all that had ever lived and dreamed within it. For the first time, SpongeBob spoke, not out loud, but quietly inside his thoughts. Is this what the ocean dreams about? The jellyfish pulsed once, brighter as if in answer. The light flickered through the water like a heartbeat. He had grown impossibly still. Even the smallest ripples seemed to pause, caught between one breath and the next. Above, the sky was neither night nor morning, a deep, translucent blue where stars lingered faintly, refusing to let go. They shimmered like forgotten wishes, slowly fading into the soft wash of dawn. SpongeBob floated at the edge of it all. The moon hung low behind him now, pale and worn, sinking gently toward the other side of the world. Ahead, the horizon stretched wide and empty, a silver line between the fading dark and the light that was coming. The water reflected both perfectly, so that he couldn't tell where the sky ended and the ocean began. It was as if the world had become one endless mirror, holding its breath. He felt weightless in that in-between moment, suspended in calm. The water around him was cool, smooth as glass. Every slow movement sent delicate ripples outward, rings of light sliding away until they melted into the distance. He watched them travel, each ripple smaller, quieter, until it vanished into stillness again. There was something deeply peaceful in that rhythm, as if even the sea had fallen asleep beside him. A faint glow began to appear at the farthest edge of the horizon. It wasn't bright, not yet just a suggestion of warmth, a pale gold pressing gently against the blue. The light moved slowly, like the first note of a song taking shape. SpongeBob watched in silence. He could feel it reaching through the water, turning the surface into shifting threads of silver and amber. Tiny plankton rose with the change, glowing faintly as the water warmed. They moved like drifting stars, gathering into slow, swirling patterns that mirrored the constellations still visible above. It was as though the sky and sea were speaking to each other, one exhaling, the other breathing in. The stars in the water brightened as the stars in the sky dimmed, until their reflections were all that remained. For a brief moment, SpongeBob floated between two heavens, one fading, one being born. He breathed slowly, letting the rhythm of the tide match his chest. The gentle sound of the waves, soft, steady, patient, filled the space around him. Each sound seemed to dissolve into the next. The distant whisper of water meeting sand, the faint crackle of bubbles rising and bursting. Everything blended into one continuous lullaby that neither began nor ended. He turned his gaze upward. The last few stars blinked softly, like sleepy eyes closing. Their light slipped away, leaving trails that melted into the growing dawn. SpongeBob felt a quiet gratitude for them, those ancient lights that had guided him through the long, dreamlike night. He imagined them resting now somewhere beyond the sky, waiting for evening to come again. The golden glow spread wider. It reached across the ocean like a slow-moving tide of light. Colors began to bloom, pinks that melted into orange, orange into gold, gold into soft white. The water caught each hue and held it gently, turning every wave into a moving canvas. It was a sunrise that didn't rush, one that unfolded as though time itself were learning how to breathe again. SpongeBob drifted closer to the surface, his body rising with the light. He could see tiny air bubbles floating around him, each one glinting like a tiny sun. The reflections danced across his face, across the water, across everything. And for the first time since drifting into the deep dream, he felt something familiar, the simple, quiet joy of morning. He smiled faintly. There was no excitement in it, no sudden spark, just warmth. The kind of warmth that comes when the world is still half asleep and everything feels possible again. The ocean sighed softly beneath him, as if answering that feeling. It was not a voice, but it was enough. As the first ray of sunlight touched the horizon, the color of the sea changed completely. What had been blue and silver now became gold and crystal. The line between sky and water blurred even further until it disappeared. It was as though the world had unfolded endlessly in every direction. Not up, not down, Not forward, just infinite. SpongeBob felt the quiet awe of it sink through him like a slow tide. He realized that the horizon wasn't a line at all. It wasn't something far away. It was here in the water, in the air, in the space inside his chest. Everywhere he looked, it followed, endless and patient. The sea was not a boundary. It was a circle one that contained everything, even dreams. A school of small silver fish passed beneath him, their movements gentle and fluid. They glowed faintly as they turned, catching the newborn light on their scales. For a few moments, they drew shapes across the ocean's surface spirals, waves, trails that looked almost like handwriting. And then, one by one, they vanished into the brighter water ahead. SpongeBob watched them go, feeling no need to follow. He was already where he needed to be. The breeze brushed against his face again, warmer now, carrying the faint scent of coral and sand. Somewhere in the distance, he thought he could hear the soft echo of the reef waking, a distant crackle of snapping shrimp, the slow flutter of kelp leaves shifting with the tide, the sigh of shells being turned gently by the current. The world was stirring. And yet, even in that awakening, everything remained calm, as if the dream still lingered just below the surface. He closed his eyes for a moment and simply listened. The hum of the deep was gone now, but in its place was something new, a heartbeat lighter, quicker but no less soothing. It was the pulse of morning, slow and steady, spreading through the water and sky alike. Each beat seemed to whisper a single, unspoken truth. The horizon never ends. The dream never ends. Only the light changes. SpongeBob opened his eyes again. The first full edge of the sun had risen above the horizon, bright but gentle, its glow bending through the surface like molten glass. He lifted one arm slightly, feeling the warmth brush against his hand through the water. It felt alive, tender, full of promise. The golden light reached across his body, across the sea, and for the briefest moment, everything shimmered as one. The sun continued to rise, slow and graceful, as if reluctant to disturb the quiet stillness that had settled over the world. Its light touched the surface of the water in long golden threads, spilling downward into the blue until even the deepest shadows began to glow. The ocean shimmered, every wave bending and folding like silk in a gentle breeze. The colors changed with every heartbeat, gold melting into rose, rose into soft turquoise, turquoise into quiet white. SpongeBob floated through it all, his body half illuminated by the light filtering from above. The warmth spread across his chest, his arms, his face, until it felt like the sea itself was embracing him. He closed his eyes again, letting the sunlight paint his eyelids in faint orange hues. It was the first warmth he'd felt since drifting into the deep dream, and it felt alive, not in a way that pulled him awake, but in a way that made waking gentle, natural. The tide moved with him, slow and patient. He could sense the ocean's breath, that long inhale and exhale that had been with him since the beginning. It was softer now, quieter no longer, the vast hum of the deep, but something tender, almost affectionate. Each pulse of current brushed against him like a whisper, reminding him that he was home, that he had never truly left. Below, the coral reef began to glow with the coming day. The soft sponges and sea anemones opened their petals, releasing small bubbles that shimmered like pearls as they rose. Tiny crabs scurried along the sand, their shells catching flickers of pink light. Jellyfish drifted slowly past, their translucent bells pulsing like lanterns still glowing after a long night. Every movement Every glint of color seemed to breathe with the rhythm of dawn. SpongeBob drifted lower, letting his body sink until he hovered just above the coral floor. He could see the fine details now, the ridges of shells, the trails left by sleeping snails, the faint movements of sea stars stretching after stillness. It was all so peaceful, so perfectly balanced. Nothing rushed. Nothing tried to hurry the morning. Everything simply was. He reached out and brushed his hand over the sand. It was soft and cool, textured like silk under water. A few grains floated upward, spiraling lazily in the light before settling again. The motion made him smile faintly, such a small, simple thing, but so full of meaning. Every touch in the sea seemed to last longer than it should, as if even time was reluctant to move too fast. Above him, a ray of sunlight pierced the surface and reached all the way down to where he floated. It cut through the water like a path, glowing golden white. Particles shimmered in it, bits of plankton, fragments of shell dust, specks of living light. He followed it upward with his eyes, tracing it to where the surface rippled gently under the morning breeze. That light, he thought, was endless too, stretching from the heart of the sun to the quietest grain of sand below. A school of tiny fish passed through the ray, scattering it into countless beams. They darted and swirled, turning as one, creating patterns that looked almost like laughter. For a moment, SpongeBob thought he could hear it faint and distant, not real laughter, but something that carried the same warmth. He imagined his friends now, still sleeping in their homes above the reef, wrapped in dreams that glowed faintly with the remnants of night. He could picture Patrick's rock, Squidward's house, even the outline of the crusty crab catching the first light of day. The thought brought him peace, not longing. The dream had not separated him from them, it had simply reminded him of what connected them all. The ocean that cradled him now was the same one that touched their homes, their thoughts, their quiet dreams. Everything was linked by the same slow pulse of water and light. The current shifted gently, turning him toward the horizon again. He floated on his back once more, staring up through the rippling surface. The world above had grown brighter, the sky now brushed with pale gold and faint rose. A few clouds hung low, thin and soft, their edges burning faintly in the sun's first reach. The reflection of the sky shimmered across the water, folding and unfolding with every small movement of the tide. He lifted one hand, watching how the sunlight refracted through the thin film of water on his skin. It glimmered like liquid glass, breaking into 1,000 tiny rainbows that disappeared as quickly as they appeared. That fleeting beauty made him think maybe that was what the sea was trying to teach him all along, that nothing lasts forever, but nothing is ever truly lost either. Every moment, every glint of light, every dream, they all returned somewhere, somehow in another form. He let that thought drift, the way a jellyfish lets go of a current. He didn't need to hold on to it. The understanding was enough. It felt like the ocean had whispered something ancient to him, something beyond words. Something about circles, about beginnings that never end. The world was fully awake now, yet somehow still peaceful. The soft hum of early morning had replaced the quiet of night. The distant rustle of life stirring in the reef, the low tone of waves rolling against unseen rocks. Far above, gulls passed faintly overhead, their shadows flickering across the surface. He couldn't hear their cries from this depth, but he could see their movements, slow arcs against the sky, graceful and free. They seemed to follow the same rhythm the sea did, unhurried, eternal. SpongeBob turned his gaze toward the horizon once more. It stretched endlessly, just as it had before, but now it shimmered with the full light of morning. There was no edge, no point of arrival, only continuation. The world felt open, vast, yet intimately calm. He felt his thoughts dissolve again, like sand settling in clear water. The sun was climbing higher now, its rays cutting deep, setting the entire ocean aglow. SpongeBob felt that light sink into him, not just warmth on his skin, but something deeper, like the sea itself was breathing through him. He exhaled slowly, his body swaying with the current. There was no need to move, no need to think, no need to wake fully. Morning would come on its own. For now, he simply drifted, part of the horizon, part of the sea, part of everything that breathed. The light had changed again. It was no longer the fragile gold of sunrise, nor the deep silver of night. It was warm now, full and steady, rippling gently through the water like breath through a sleeping body. Every ripple of the sea caught it and released it again, scattering rays in 1,000 directions. The whole ocean seemed to shimmer with calm purpose, alive but unhurried. SpongeBob floated through it all, eyes half closed, body relaxed and drifting. His thoughts moved like waves, slow, rhythmic, always returning to stillness. There was no beginning, no end, just this quiet motion of light and water that seemed to go on forever. He could feel the tide gently carrying him closer to familiar places, the soft pull of home beneath the golden morning. In the distance, faint shapes began to form, the soft outlines of coral towers, the shadows of the reef's edge. Tiny bubbles rose from hidden vents, shimmering as they climbed toward the surface. Each bubble caught a fragment of sunlight, carrying it upward like a secret gift for the sky. SpongeBob watched them rise until they disappeared into the glare above, and somehow that small act made him feel lighter. Everything around him seemed to know exactly where it belonged. A soft current brushed past, turning him slightly. He saw the faint silhouette of a jellyfish gliding nearby, one of the same kind that had followed him in the dream. Its bell pulsed slowly, graceful as always, trailing faint ribbons of blue light. It moved closer, close enough for him to see the faint spark that flickered in its center. Not a flame, not energy, but something that felt alive in a different way. It hovered there, neither curious nor cautious, simply present. They drifted together for a while, silent companions in the growing light. SpongeBob smiled softly. It wasn't the wide grin he wore during the day, full of joy and excitement. This smile was smaller, gentler, like the sea itself. He reached out slowly, his hand brushing through the water near the jellyfish. It pulsed once, almost in greeting, then turned and drifted away toward the horizon. He didn't feel sadness as it left, only gratitude. In its quiet way, it had reminded him that even in the vastness of the ocean, he was never truly alone. He turned his gaze downward. The seafloor below glowed with color, now patches of coral blooming in soft purples, greens, and oranges. Small creatures scurried along the sand, their movements rhythmic, unhurried. A sea snail left a thin silver trail behind it, winding through the coral like handwriting on glass. Every detail felt sacred in its simplicity. It was as if the whole ocean had awakened not with noise, but with awareness. He drifted lower again, just close enough for his fingers to graze the top of a coral branch. It was smooth and cool to the touch, firm yet alive. A tiny shrimp darted away, its shell flashing pink as it disappeared into a hollow. He whispered a quiet apology, though no sound left his lips. Even silence felt like communication here. The sea didn't need words. It spoke in touch, in color, in rhythm. The current shifted again, stronger this time, pulling him gently toward the open expanse beyond the reef. He didn't resist. He allowed it to guide him, trusting its flow. The water grew clearer, brighter, until it seemed made of pure light. The horizon stretched endlessly ahead, its golden line glowing brighter now under the climbing sun. As he moved farther from the reef, the sound of the sea changed. It became softer, more spacious, a deep hum beneath the high, delicate tones of water moving over sand. Its sound carried something within it, the echo of every dream, every whisper, every quiet thought that had ever drifted through the ocean. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was eternal. SpongeBob floated in the middle of it all, perfectly still, letting the sound wrap around him like warmth. His mind felt clear, empty, but peaceful. The weight of the deep dream, the glow, the constellations, all of it lingered within him now. Not as memories, but as part of who he was. He could feel the balance between waking and dreaming, between the deep and the surface. And in that balance he found complete calm. Above him, the light shimmered through the surface, forming soft, waving patterns that danced across his skin. He lifted a hand to watch the shapes move, a slow mosaic of light and water weaving together. Each flicker felt like a gentle reminder that even the simplest things were full of wonder. He let the water move him, turning slowly, effortlessly, in that glowing expanse. He thought of the horizon again, that endless line of light that had watched him through the night. He realized now it was not something far away. It was something within him. The horizon lived in everything that drifted and returned, the coral that grew and crumbled, the waves that rose and fell, the light that disappeared and came back as morning. Even the dreams he had seen in the deep would return again someday, in new shapes, new colors. Nothing was ever gone. It only changed form. He floated higher now, the current gentler near the surface. Through the rippling water, he could see the sky clearly vast and blue, scattered with pale white clouds. It looked infinite, yet familiar. The same sky that had once watched him working at the Krusty Krab, laughing with Patrick, or sitting quietly under his pineapple porch. It was all connected, this sky, this sea, this still moment of light. The sunlight sparkled across his face as he exhaled slowly. His bubbles drifted upward, round and bright, catching fragments of color as they rose. He followed them with his eyes until they reached the surface and vanished. Each one disappeared quietly, but he didn't feel loss. There was something beautiful in their vanishing, the way they rejoined the air, invisible but present. He understood now that the horizon was not a place to reach, but a way of being. It was the quiet acceptance that everything moves, everything drifts, everything returns. It was peace without ending. It was the sea's soft promise that even as the light grows stronger and the world wakes up, stillness remains beneath it all. SpongeBob let himself sink slightly, just enough for the water to cover his ears again. The world became muffled, the hum returning faintly like a voice from far away. He closed his eyes and smiled again, carried by that sound, by that infinite horizon that stretched both inside and beyond him. Time no longer felt like something that passed. It drifted, like everything else here, soft and circular, without direction or demand. The sea breathed quietly around SpongeBob, and he breathed with it. Each inhale was a tide coming in. Each exhale, a tide receding. He could sense that Bikini Bottom wasn't far now. Though the water still shimmered with golden light, the shapes beneath it began to look familiar, the slow curves of jellyfish fields, the dim outline of Squidward's tall stone house in the distance, the faint sound of bubbles rising from the Krusty Krab's fryer vents. Home was out there, not waiting, not calling, just existing. Like the horizon itself, it had never really been gone. He turned lazily in the current, eyes half-lidded. The light had softened again, settling into a tranquil rhythm. It was the hour before the day truly began, when even the sun seemed to pause for a moment before climbing higher. Fish began to emerge from their coral shelters, shaking sleep from their fins. A gentle hum spread through the water, a chorus of quiet life waking to the morning. SpongeBob watched it all from his slow drift. He didn't hurry. The thought of work, of errands, of the clock ticking on the wall, it all felt distant, part of a smaller world that lived above the one he was floating through now. Here in this endless horizon of light and calm, time was not a thing to measure, but a thing to feel. He could feel it in the way bubbles rose, in the subtle shift of the current, in the way light changed shape as it met the moving surface. He turned slightly and saw the sea floor drop into a wide clearing of sand. It looked like a mirror of the sky, rippled, endless, shimmering faintly with morning light. He let himself drift lower until his feet touched the soft, cool sand. It gave slightly beneath him, sending tiny silver clouds upward that sparkled in the water. He stood there quietly for a while, looking at the horizon from below. It stretched on and on, a golden ribbon dividing the sea and sky, breathing between two infinities. He sat down cross-legged, letting his arms rest at his sides. Around him, small shells glowed faintly with trapped reflections. Tiny fish darted between them, creating quick flashes of motion in the stillness. He listened. Not for words, not for sound, but for rhythm. The gentle, living rhythm that moved through everything. In that moment, he thought of all the dreams he had seen through the long night, the drifting jellyfish that shimmered like lanterns, the mirror-like walls of memory, the glowing coral forests, the abyss of quiet thought. They all felt like different versions of the same thing. Different ways the ocean reminded him to breathe. Maybe, he thought, that's what dreams really were. The sea teaching him how to be still, how to listen, how to remember without clinging, to drift without fear, to glow without reason. A soft current brushed by again, lifting grains of sand into tiny spirals. He followed one spiral with his eyes, tracing its slow motion as it rose, twisted, and disappeared into the light above. The pattern repeated again and again, small and infinite. He felt comfort in it, the way even the smallest motion in the ocean carried the shape of eternity. He leaned back on his hands and looked up. Through the water ceiling, the sunlight rippled in golden webs. Every wave on the surface bent the light differently, weaving patterns that changed second by second but never lost their grace. The sea was never still, yet never chaotic. It was perfect in its restlessness, a dance of balance and surrender. He whispered softly, though his words were lost in the current. Maybe that's what it means to be alive. Not to chase every horizon, but to float within it. To move, to drift, to rest. To be part of the ocean's breathing. For a long time, he didn't move. He just sat there, suspended between the seafloor and the open sky, his body almost weightless. Every breath seemed to carry him deeper into calm. The rhythm of the water became his heartbeat. The slow swirl of bubbles his thoughts. Even his smile had softened into stillness. Not joy, not sadness, just peace. Then slowly, the current began to shift again. Gentle, coaxing, carrying him back toward Bikini Bottom. He let go and rose with it, his body turning in the stream. Above him, the faint outline of the surface grew clearer, brighter. He passed over coral mounds, seaweed gardens, tiny drifting schools of glowing plankton. Everywhere he looked, the sea was alive and quiet, like a world waking in prayer. The light grew warmer. Through it, he could see the shape of his pineapple house in the distance, small, round, and steady. The sight made something inside him soften even more. Home. Not the end of a dream, but its continuation. A place where the rhythm of life kept flowing laughter, work, quiet evenings, moments of stillness between it all. The same ocean that had cradled his sleep was the one that carried his days. He floated down beside his house and rested one hand on the smooth coral wall. It felt cool beneath his fingers. The small bubbles escaping from the sand tickled his feet. He exhaled slowly and watched the last of his air drift upward in a soft spiral, vanishing into the morning. The sky above shimmered like glass, unbroken. He felt no need to move, no need to speak. The silence between him and the sea was enough. Everything he had seen, everything he had felt, still moved through him quietly, the glow, the jellyfish, the distant hum of the abyss, the first light of morning. It was all part of the same endless breath. And then, as he turned his gaze to the far horizon one last time, he noticed something. The light never stopped there. It didn't end where the sky met the sea. It continued, blending into the water, then into him. There was no line separating anything. The horizon wasn't a boundary. It was a reminder that everything was already one. The sea sighed softly around him. The current shifted again, gentle as a hand tucking him back into comfort. He smiled, closed his eyes, and let the light wash over him. The ocean breathed. He breathed. And somewhere beyond sight, the horizon breathed too endless, quiet, alive. Nothing ended. Nothing began. There was only stillness, the soundless rhythm of the sea, and the soft glow of forever.